Morning, everyone. Welcome to week 8 of PPA 551. Today, we're going to be talking about recruitment and selection in our continued journey through HR. What I want you to really take away from this lesson is how we can continue to apply those strategic management principles to our recruitment and selection process. But also, I want to give you a little bit of an insight into how recruitment and selection really works to help you as a job seeker maximize your opportunities. So for today, we're going to be talking about essentially two different buckets of HR work. We're going to talk about recruitment, which is the process of attracting qualified candidates to apply for positions, and then selection, which is the interviewing, the screening, the process where we have to go through and make sure that the people that we are interviewing are able or capable and of doing the job. Just like everything else with this class, remember that it's people that provide goods and services that run these programs that are the ones actually out there serving the community. So it is just as important for us to be strategic about the people that we're finding and hiring into these positions as it is for being strategic about how those goods and services are delivered. Um, when you're recruiting, there's always a process beforehand. We call it the pre-recruitment process. Before recruitment, you have to do a couple of different things. There's legwork you have to do, especially if you want to keep it within that SHRM realm. Um, I, the first thing is you want to take that job analysis, you want to take that research and understand if future organizational needs um, for KSAOCs, the different talents, everything that we need for the organization, if those are different than what we currently have in the organization. Then we also need to figure out, are there qualifications for this position and how can we ensure that we're identifying those qualifications? And then you want to identify career patterns that fit within the department or agency's framework as well. So this is taking all the work that we talked about last week with job analysis. This is taking that larger SHRM approach to your workforce and identifying what are the qualifications, what are the trends that we're seeing, and how can we make sure that we're setting our employees up for success even before we start recruiting and hiring them. You can always start with a recruitment process internally. Internal recruitment is a very common process. Some public nonprofit agencies actually give preference to existing employees. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a little bit of a devil that you know versus devil that you don't approach to internal hiring that a lot of agencies take. Um, to do proper internal recruitment, you want to be able to track the KSAOCs of your current employees to look for those qualified internal candidates. Understanding what your organization looks like, understanding the skills that your current employees have is really important. Administrators have an opportunity to review and evaluate candidates prior to selection and recoup those costs of training and developing current employees as well. Um, we can also consider if specialized skills need to be brought in externally or if we need to have more diversity. So internal recruitment is often a very attractive option for hiring managers. The issue is that you're keeping everything internal. You're not allowing for those new perspectives to come in. That's not inherently dispositive, but it's important for us to understand the trade-offs of doing internal recruitment versus external recruitment. External recruitment is the harder part. External recruitment is working to recruit from a relevant labor market, whether it's local, regional, national, and depending on the skills. This is a whole field in and of itself. Um, a lot of recruitment nowadays is done through e-recruitment using things like our websites like USA Jobs, using things like LinkedIn and other social networks, other online sites. You've got your Zip Recruiters, you've got your what's the Indeed, all these different things that you can use, and each of them has pros and cons. And really, what you want to be considering when you're doing external recruitment is what is the market that you're looking for, what are the skills that you're looking for, and are they skills that we know exist in our labor market, or is it something where we need to do extra legwork to ensure that we're attracting those right type of candidates. Um, local governments and nonprofits in particular have some very specific needs that they'll need to meet during the recruitment process. So local governments, nonprofits, because they're generally smaller organizations, you have to take extra steps to ensure that you're targeting the appropriate labor market, that you're posting open positions, and your advertising is accurate and realistic. You also have to make sure you're compliant with ADA and EEO, and ensure all job postings are available to the appropriate audiences, including veterans, individuals with disabilities as well. One of the things that my local government is working really hard with right now is being able to recruit from diverse talent pools. This involves a lot of legwork in connecting with professional organizations that we may not naturally have connections with. So, Black professionals have a lot of their own professional networks that you can reach and tap into. Uh, Women in the workforce, women in government have professional networks. So to ensure that diversity is being achieved, you often have to go and do extra legwork to find where you can how you can draw on those talent pools. Um, One of the biggest challenges nowadays is the adaptability of our recruiting process to be able to recruit for Gen Z. As we've talked about before, Gen Z has different values than we have traditionally understood in the workplace. Now, these values are terrible and we should never, no, I'm joking. But um, when when we're recruiting, this is something that as generational values change, you have to be able to adapt to. So when we're recruiting for Gen Z, research has shown a couple of different things. Um, you looking at what makes Gen Z tick is more difficult than it generally looks like, and so and having an adaptive culture may help recruit members of Gen Z. Connecting their work to a community social responsibility, giving their more simply giving their job purpose. um, Varying importance in work values. There's this is something that I hear constantly, complaints about recruiting young people, is that they don't care about those traditional appeals of the government work that other generations do, such as good benefits or good retirement programs, right? They don't have those same values, and so you have to understand where they're at. And a lot of times, it's about cost of living and pay. And then looking at intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. A lot of times Gen Z has been shown to really enjoy those intrinsic rewards and have greater retention with jobs in which they feel personally validated through the work that they do. And extrinsic rewards. The stereotypical example of this is the fancy watch you get upon retirement when you work with the company forever, right? Those aren't motivating factors for Gen Z for the most part. And then it's also important to acknowledge gender as part of the Gen Z recruiting puzzle that we're trying to solve. Um, Gen Z in general, they're looking for a couple of different things, and I'd be interested to hear how you think this differs from A, your values, and B, the values of generation before you. Gen Z is looking for career advancement. They're looking for ongoing training and ongoing education opportunities. They're looking for work to just be work. They want job satisfaction. They want to feel like their work matters. They want support from their supervisors. They want flexible work-life programs, and they want that community social responsibility and that public service motivation and public service mentality. Um, Really, what Gen Z is demonstrating to the workplace right now is exactly what we've been talking about this entire class. Modern HR requires us to treat employees like people who happen to be employees and not employees who happen to be people. The human part of work is required for Gen Z. They need to know that they will be supported as people and that their work matters. Um, to ensure that our management systems and our strategic approach to recruiting Gen Z um, aligns, here are a few things that you can consider when building out your human resources management program, while also looking to recruit Gen Z as well. So an adaptive culture. This is a culture of change. Change is difficult. Change is hard. Change is scary to a lot of people, especially longer tenured incumbent employees. Um, ensure that your organization is modern, using online job platforms, engaging in social media, having a visible digital preference. This is actually more difficult nowadays than it was before, because this is not as simple as just having social media pages. It's about having a true digital presence online. Gen Z is looking for organizations that feel modern, and government oftentimes does not do that. And so it's important to keep that in mind. Having streamlined recruiting processes. The recruitment process for a lot of organizations is too long. How long is it? I don't know, but it's too long for most candidates, right? You're wanting candidates are looking for an opportunity to say, apply, interview, to continue moving through the process. Nothing sucks more than being a job candidate and not hearing anything for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. Um, that is something that if you're not moving through this process quickly, you're going to lose candidates, and you're going to lose a lot of younger candidates as well. Um, allowing for reverse mentorship. This is really important, because especially in things like DEI, right? We're relying on younger individuals to come in and contribute to and evolve our work culture. And so providing that mentorship to Gen Z is just as important as allowing Gen Z to be able to mentor you as well. Um, having redesigned office spaces. This is even more broad than that. Having no office spaces is oftentimes one of the things that Gen Z is looking for in a workplace. Providing constant, accurate, honest feedback is really important. Trust and autonomy, again, that ongoing training, offering competitive salaries and benefits. I think benefits actually is probably a little less important than it used to be. In the long term, we want strong benefits programs, but really the competitive salaries is what a lot of younger job candidates are looking for. Again, a quick response, and then is there succession planning? Is there a logical place for, if you hire Gen Z into the workplace, is it a logical place for them to grow, right? So these are the sort of HRM needs that you need to be able to work in if you're going to successfully recruit Gen Z. Now we've recruited, we've gone out there, we found those candidates, we've said that's great. Now, how do we narrow it down? And this is a process we call screening. To narrow the applicant pool, essentially what we need to start with is eliminating applicants who don't meet the minimum requirements. And this is why that job analysis is really important. If we can properly identify what the minimum requirements of the job are, for example, minimum competencies, minimum education and job experiences, you're eliminating those candidates and doing a good job recruiting. You're ideally not getting a lot of candidates that you're eliminating because they're not meeting minimum requirements. And then you're eliminating applicants who don't have the requisite experience. If there are specific technical experiences that you're looking for, you're going through and you're eliminating those applicants. This is going to go without saying for the rest of it, but I do also want to remind you that as we go through the screening process, it is critical that you communicate with applicants regularly, quickly, and honestly. If you're not uh, if someone doesn't meet the minimum requirements, you want to communicate that to them and say, hey, you don't meet these minimum requirements. And we don't want to necessarily take applicants that don't fit the requirements for one position and burn them on the organization as a whole. We want to make sure that their job experience, even though they're not moving past just the initial screening of their application, we want to make sure that they're still treated fairly and honestly. Um, for administrative and professional positions, the screening needs to start with some pre-established screening criteria and some sort of checklist to help screen resumes. This allows for greater transparency about the screening process, and it also allows you to capture the requirements that you've outlined in your job analysis. Um, Oftentimes, you may start with a background investigation or a consumer report, and then the internet can be used for informal screenings. This is why it's really important for you to, as a job candidate, have all of your social media be private. Um, a lot of times, the first thing that people will do when they receive job applications, they'll look you up on LinkedIn, they'll look you up on Facebook, they'll look you up on Twitter, just to get a sense of, really, when you're early on in the screening process, you're really looking for anything that can differentiate and disqualify candidates up front to ensure that you're not continuing through the process with someone that may not be a good fit for the organization. And so this is why it's really important for job candidates to be careful about their social media, and for the hiring managers to be thoughtful and strategic about the criteria that they're looking for. Um, with screening and selection can take a bunch of different forms. I'm not going to talk through each and every one of these, but there's a couple of different things that you can do during the screening process that you may or may not have seen in a job interview yourself. You can do cognitive ability and aptitude tests to ensure that they have the specific skills required, achievement tests as well. This is less and less common, but you can do personality inventories or interest inventories where you're going through and you're essentially trying to figure out what's the personality of the candidate to see if they're a good fit. You can rate them on experience and training. You can have structured oral exams or work sample and performance tests. In my experience, those last two are the most common. Having some sort of strategic approach to understand, can you do the job? Do you have the requisite knowledge that we're looking for? But all of these techniques are going to change depending on the type of position you are hiring for. Um, you can also have group discussions. You can have assessment centers, biodata, drug testing is something that is always a hot topic. Honesty and integrity tests, less common but still important to know. Lie detector exams. I can't imagine that lie detector exams are actually used in any significant fashion for most positions nowadays, but definitely something that has traditionally been in the toolbox of the selection criteria. And then physical ability tests and basket exercises are all different ways that we can use to screen and select our candidates. Um, Now, again, everything layers on top of each other in this class. And so we've been talking about, how our job analysis roles and everything, how we can use DEI principles to ensure that we're recruiting appropriate candidates. But we also need to make sure that what we're asking candidates to do is not a violation of their rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So employers are permitted to ask applicants about their ability to perform job functions, but they may not ask about disabilities before a job offer has been made. That is a nuanced line, but a really important line to understand. You are allowed to, during interviews, during screenings, ask about someone's ability to perform a job function, but you may not ask them about the disability specifically. Medical examinations are procedures or tests that seek information about the existence, nature, or severity of an individual's physical or mental impairment, or that seek information regarding an individual's physical or psychological health. In general, medical examinations are what we're trying to avoid. However, physical agility and physical fitness tests are not medical examinations. That's testing someone's ability to physically perform the duties required of them in the job. Psychological examinations are the same thing, where you're including aptitude tests or personality tests, honesty tests, intended to measure an applicant's capacity to be able to perform a job. They're also not considered medical examinations. So that line is really, really important. We can get creative with the pre-employment testing strategies that we use, but we cannot violate people's ADA rights. Now, interviews. Raise your hand if you have nothing but positive interview experiences. Oh, I'm recording. That's right. Interviews. Interviews are some of the I would say some of the biggest mystery, biggest black boxes that we have within the recruitment and selection world. Interviews are often the deciding factor for who gets hired for a position. The problem with interviews and why they're so popular is that they're incredibly subjective, and they often don't ask questions that actually differentiate employees. Successful interviews require planning and structure. This is why the job analysis process is really important, because you're setting yourself up to ensure that you're able to differentiate candidates based off of their KSAOCs. When you don't give yourself the ability to differentiate candidates in that way, you end up making decisions based off of arbitrary and often illegal practices about culture fit, about, or is that someone that you may be able to get along with, and then you're letting the hiring manager's personal biases come into play, right? We want to set the interviews up so that the KSAOCs are what you're looking for. Um, interview interviews, this is not often how it works, but they should be considered alongside other factors of selection, not as the only factor of selection. To do an appropriate interview process, to do it successfully, you're starting with your job analysis. You're developing questions based off of that job analysis, and you're asking questions that effectively get to the root of what you're trying to answer. You're using detailed rating scales and supplementing with examples. You're training interviewers. You're using interview panels so that more than one person conducts interviews. You take notes and you assess a candidate's responses objectively using a rating scale or a score. You evaluate selection decisions based off of performance in the interview, not necessarily based off of your perception, right? So it's really important to create those scales, create that structure to your process so that you can assess candidate responses objectively and really get to the heart of the matter. Now, a lot of times what we'll do for especially more technically skilled position is we're going to put tests into the process to ensure that people are competent enough to be able to do the job. Employment tests that measure cognitive ability skills are controversial because they often have an adverse impact on protected class members. If you're asking someone to complete a Scantron type exam to test their ability, you're essentially boxing out neurodivergent people. You're boxing out people with differential lived experiences when it comes to education, and you're creating issues down the line for those protected classes of candidates. Um, State and local governments constantly get in trouble over paper and pencil tests and what impact it has. Because the strategic approach to the human resources is not often considered. State and local governments will like cling to these different strategies as any way to objectively differentiate between their employee or their candidates, and frankly, it's just not ever going to really do the job it's looking for. You're going to be continuing to harm those protected classes. You're going to continue to discriminate through the work processes, and you're not actually hiring based off of those objective criteria. when when we're testing, the reason why testing is such a difficult and such a controversial topic is that measurement of those tests is often not reliable or valid. So, to ensure the consistency of measurement, your testing and retesting is one way to check it. You take the test twice and you store the same score. Cool. It's a reliable measurement. You can have a split half correlation where one part of the exam correlates with the other part of the exam. You have odd even correlations where odd numbers and even number questions on the exam are aligned. You have internal consistency measures. Each exam item is correlated with every other exam item, right? Is it all talking to each other? Or you can have equivalent forms, which are different forms of an exam that have been constructed, and the scores in the exams are correlated. So this allows you to create perhaps oral versions of exams to allow for people of different abilities to take the test. Um, Now, to ensure that our measurements are valid, you have to have content validity. Content validity is simply, does the instrument that we're using, that testing instrument, reflect the KSAOCs considered essential for the job? We don't want to be testing people just for the sake of putting them through a test. We want to make sure that the questions we're asking them and what we're asking them to do is related to those essential job functions. You can also have criterion validity, which are whether test scores are predictors that are related to the performance on some sort of job performance criterion. So this is ensuring that, you know, this is essentially trying to tie together the score that you did on a pre-exam test and your ability to perform the job down the line. This requires a strong job analysis. It's the development of an exam based off of KSAOCs. Then you individuals are selected and you obtain those job performance measures, and then you compare the relationship between the test and the job performance to ensure that criterion during the hiring process is valid. Criterion validity can also have a predictive value as well, since only people that have high test scores are picked. Low scores could mean good employees that aren't getting picked. So, are we actually is the score you're getting on the exam actually predictive of strong employees? Then you have concurrent validity, where you test incumbents who currently have a position and compare their job performance. Oh, excuse me. Anyway, sorry about that. This is what happens when you work from home, right? You know, no one wants to work anymore. Anyway, all right. So talking about criterion validity, um, we can also have construct validity, which are using selection instruments that are developed and used to measure the hypothesized constructs or traits related to successful job performance. For example, do you have a something that tests intelligence, motivation, aggressiveness, anxiety? This is where those personality tests often come into play as well. The problem with construct validity is that it's hard to measure, and you often need proof that it actually relates to job requirements, right? A lot of times older individuals, older hiring managers will want to use IQ tests, will want to use these personality tests that they personally enjoy or put a lot of weight in, but evidence does not suggest that as actually setting them selves up to be able to select the best candidates. And often you're going to want to consult experts on these sort of constructs to ensure that they are actually linked to the work that they do. So for the most part, when we're using these tests, what we want to focus on is how are they connected to the KSAOCs, and can we verify that what we're asking candidates to do has some sort of correlation to their eventual performance in the job. Um, the One of the lessons I want to mention today is this concept of culture fit. One of the ways that um, systemic discrimination has continued to persist through the hiring process is through the concept of culture fit. Culture fit is this concept that it's a subjective measure wherein the hiring manager or the hiring panel is essentially making an assessment on whether or not someone will fit into the organization's current culture. Um, there are numerous obvious problems with using a concept like culture fit, because you're often reinforcing either conscious or subconscious biases, and what is indicative of your an organizational culture may be different depending on different people. And so instead of using culture fit, we're looking at person organization fit instead. This is looking at practical intelligence. Practical intelligence is not just do you have the education, but do you gained the skills, learned the skills outside of that? Do you have the skills necessary to be able to perform the job? Is there adaptability in this person? Is this person that only will be successful through structure, or can they be adaptive to different situations? Using multiple different types of intelligences, including emotional, social intelligences as well. You can use some personality measures, but I will point you to my previous slide about ensuring that your personality tests are actually backed up by research and are valid measures. Um, Citizen performance and organizational citizen behavior is also another component to consider when ensuring that someone is a good fit. But we don't want to use culture fit because we are reinforcing those same uh, biases that have continued to create an unfair system. Um, there is a different world that I'm not even really going to touch on here about executive and managerial recruitment. It's a whole new subculture. Um, we often for example, we're actively hiring a city attorney, so we're going through an executive search firm, often colloquially called a headhunter, where we're essentially saying, hey, we need someone who can do this, and then these firms will have be tied into networks of qualified executive high performing individuals, um, which is great because you're going out, you're finding people who are going to be qualified, but it's often difficult to describe the components of an executive level position. And so if you want this to be successful, organizations have to invest the time and effort to recognize the interrelationships between the behaviors, the managerial effectiveness, and the organizational success, and you have to plan the search process accordingly. The problem with a lot of executive search processes is that you're relying on the firm that you hire to ensure that you're getting a broad, diverse coalition of candidates to draw from. It's really important that if you do go through this process of taking executive hiring external to the organization, that you're doing your due diligence and you're ensuring that these headhunting firms are aligning with your organizational and strategic values. Um, uh, uh, Assessing competencies for executive manager positions is more difficult as well because you're tying together these high level concepts of stakeholder relationships, management, budgeting, program development, execution, collaboration, fundraising for nonprofits, advocating for nonprofits, managing staff. These are all different things, and so it takes a lot of time and a lot of research to ensure that you're properly assessing those competencies. So, in conclusion, when we're looking at the recruitment and selection process, it should be conducted with the organizational strategy and future needs in mind. You have to do everything that we've talked about up until this point. We have to understand if you're going to have a successful recruitment and selection process. Agencies and organizations should record their recruitment and selection process to be evaluated for successes and failures. A lot of times, organizations, especially smaller organizations, are going to be afraid to do this because of legal reasons. Can you be held liable? Are you going to run into problems down the line? But in order to ensure that your selection process is fair, is actually accomplishing what you want to accomplish, we have to be able to assess our previous processes. Um, Going forward, future recruitment and selection strategies should be based on procedures that attract the most qualified candidates and screening techniques that predict successful on the job performance, right? So, as you can see, what we're really doing here is everything is starting to layer on top of itself. Everything is starting to have an effect on everything down the line. So, ensuring that we have a strategic human resources management mindset and policy in how we're managing our HR is going to set us up for success. Conducting strong job analyses is going to set us up for success. Understanding DEI values and the DEI goals of the organization is going to set us up for success. And then understanding what are those equal employment opportunity laws that we need to ensure we're following to best protect people's rights and hire a diverse pool of candidates. So as we continue to build from this week on, you're going to see this stuff start to layer on top of each other. And everything from here is essentially going to have some component of, did you do the steps before well? And if so, are you setting yourself up for success, or is it garbage in, garbage out? So next week, spring break. Enjoy your spring break. We The following week will be your final one of your final deliverables for your workforce analysis, your workforce plan. And so I will be around during spring break. If you need to chat, if you want to find some time to meet up, I'm happy to do that. But I want to thank you all. I've been very impressed with your dialogues through this first half of this class, and um, I I'm looking forward to moving through the second half of this class and getting you to the finish line. So thank you all. And we'll talk soon.